Welcome back. We seem to be living through a second phase of lockdown during this corona virus, and our lives are being restricted once again physically and socially. And I want to continue looking at the life of Therese and how she coped with limited physical activity and limited social interaction, and a whole deal of time, lots of time for solitude within the convent of Carmel. How did she manage time and the choices available to her? But before I do that, I think it's only right that I should set the wider context, historical context of these times in France and in Europe. As I said when we were talking about the childhood of Therese, indeed before she was born, 3 years before she was born, France was invaded by Prussian forces, and we had the Franco-Prussian War, and which impacted on the Martin family, because when they lived in Alençon before Therese was born, they had 9 soldiers billeted in their house. And after the war was over, or came to a conclusion, there was a lot of resettlement had to take place. And that coincided with the fall of the Bourbon monarchy, the restored monarchy, which also collapsed at this time. And we had the emergence of a French republic, a very militantly atheistic, secular agenda to put into place. And no greater enemy than organized Catholicism. We also have at the same time in the church something of a revolution going on the church itself, with the aftermath of Vatican I. The council had been called at a time when the church and the papal states were greatly endangered by the rising Risorgimento movement. Italy was becoming all the elements of becoming a separate nation, and republicanism with Garibaldi and what have you, and the seizing of the papal states and the forming of one united country, and taking, of course, the papal states meant taking large sections of Italy from the Pope, from the control of the church, and into a secular government again. And then almost some historians would say, as a reaction to that, we have the Declaration of Papal Infallibility in 1870, where, if you like, in the face of losing his temporal power, there was great concentration on the Pope's spiritual power and authority in the church and for the Christian people. And that was to have huge repercussions within the church, because not everyone accepted it. And not everyone accepted the way in which it became articulated, even within the church. So there was a lot of upheaval to encounter, and there were people who even left the church, and altogether, including bishops. So these also, as I say, were stirring revolutionary times, not only what was happening in Italy, but what was happening in France with the fall of the monarchy and the emergence of this secular state. So what laws did this new secular government enforce? Well, the first one was that they closed down 261 convents in France. The Jesuits were expelled from France, and then the government moved into the schools, and they compulsory removed all teaching orders of brothers and of sisters, and the schools became run by lay people, by the government, and the former religious teachers were not allowed to teach. On the wider scale, we had the debate going on with the emergence of greater learning and greater understanding of the sciences. We have the battle going on between the claims of science and autonomy and independence from revealed religion. And so we have this shift going on where there's a temptation to divide either science or religion as if they had nothing in common. And there were a lot of intellectual battles going on at this time, and a kind of undermining of the authority of revelation in the Bible, the undermining of the authority of the church, all in the name of intellectual freedom and independence, of course. And then at this time on the literary scene we had the emergence of Dostoevsky in Russian and his novels, and him writing about, in a different vein, but about the religious nature of man, the spiritual nature of man, and what is evil and what is good, and how that affects the heart of mankind. We have also the atheism, the open atheism of Fyodor Dostoevsky, and the emergence of Sigmund Freud in Vienna, and the development of psychoanalysis, all of which, very definitely having a different agenda from organized Christianity or the church at the time. The first two books of Nietzsche, where they tell you something beyond good and evil, was the first, and then the second work, The Antichrist. So you can see what kind of direction that's going in. Alongside all that, we had the emergence of Das Kapital by Karl Marx and his devastating critique of Western capitalism and its excesses in greed, and his emerging socialist philosophy and the declaration of the class war, and the fomenting of that kind of revolutionary thought. Stirring times. Nietzsche, of course, scorned Christ and the cross as repugnant, as degrading, as fit for only weaklings and losers. People, he said, needed to grow up and throw off the yoke of slavery and become responsible and independent. It is into this world that Therese is born, and her vocation grows, and God calls this young woman at this very interesting time. She in herself is undergoing her own revolution in following Christ and the Gospels. Therese very much strove to accept her humanity and her limitation, and to throw her complete trust in God. She had no intention of securing her own salvation by her own efforts. On the contrary, she insisted on her willingness to live a life of radical dependence on God's love and mercy. She courageously accepted her limitation as a woman and as a human being. She was revolutionary in rejecting the all-pervading contemporary Catholic spirituality, which was totally obsessive about keeping rules and avoiding sin and appeasing a very angry and harsh God. Therese would have none of this. Therese rejected all these distortions and discovered the freedom and the love of God in the Gospels, and wanted to trust his love and depend on him like beloved children. I think we could say at this stage, without giving too much away, Therese's experience of such a tremendous loving father as Louis Martin, and his complete dedication to his children, and his complete honesty and integrity and goodness and charitable nature and warm, loving human nature, definitely affected how she saw God and how she saw the fatherhood of God and how she saw trusting God as a loving father that she discovered in the scriptures. Unlike most Catholics, Therese wasn't hoping to avoid hell and get a reprieve by simply squeezing into purgatory by sheer effort and application. No. Therese rejected all the saints' lives that she found in the holy books and what we call hagiography. They were the only versions of the saints' lives available at the time. She felt they were describing the toughest of athletes as if it was an Olympic competition, and she felt completely out of their league, and she could never hope nor wish to compete with them. Though a complete version of the Bible wasn't available in the Carmel of Lisieux, Therese had access to certain parts of the scripture, particularly the New Testament. We know that she possessed a copy of the Gospels and the letters of St. Paul in particular. We know that she knew and loved the Psalms, the Song of Songs, and the prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel. In the writings of the New Testament particularly, here she felt understood, loved, and inspired to have total confidence in the love of God revealed in Jesus. On holiday once, she was intrigued by the experience of staying in a hotel where there was an elevator, and she began to think about that a lot in her mind, and she saw Jesus as something of an elevator, as a living elevator to God, and that which meant that there was no need to climb these numerous stairs of superhuman effort to reach God. The quickest and most direct route was Jesus, and that's the one she chose.